21-year-old Anggy Diaz was an immigrant from Nicaragua, and after arriving in the United States, she met and fell in love with James Jared Dicus. They then got married on Thursday, October 13, 2022, in a private ceremony and didn't invite any friends or family. After marrying, they moved into a cabin on his parents' property, about 40 miles northwest of Houston in Magnolia, Texas. She also had an aunt who lived on the same road. Anggy was described as a very positive individual who was always full of energy and loved to dance. She also loved her family dearly and was working 2 jobs to help pay for her mother's cancer treatments back in Nicaragua. Unfortunately, her marriage to Jared was not all it was cracked up to be, but you wouldn't know by looking at their social media post. It turns out their relationship was very tumultuous, and the cops had to be called on numerous occasions. 1 month into the marriage, on November 20th, 2022, Jared's true violent nature reared its ugly head when he was arrested for DWI. During the arrest, he became extremely agitated and began threatening the officer. Once in the back of the patrol car, he tried punching the windows out and eventually had to be placed in a restraint chair. It's unknown if Anggy knew about his violent side before marrying him. Regardless, 2 months later, a horrible tragedy would occur. Leading up to that, Anggy had confided in a friend that Jared was an extremely jealous person, and he had even posted a video on social media claiming that she was his. In December, they attended a Christmas party together, and Jared was upset about something and stormed out of the party. Then, on January 11th, 2023, Jared walked into his parents' home and made some strange comments, prompting them to go to the cabin behind their house to check on Anggy, unaware of the nightmare they were about to walk in on. As they entered the cabin, Jared's father saw Angie's body with her head removed and quickly called 911. When investigators arrived, they found Anggy on the floor near the bed with multiple stab wounds in her back, and her missing body part was found in the shower. Surprisingly, Jared was still there and quickly taken into custody, and after being brought in for an interview, he confessed to the murder. Meanwhile, her co-workers were trying to figure out why she hadn't shown up for her shift that day, and after calling her family, they learned the horrible news. As investigators tracked Jared's movements on the day of the murder, they discovered surveillance footage of him at the store where Anggy worked. He can be seen pulling into the parking lot around 11:40 a.m. and entering the store. He walks to the back, grabs a beer out of the cooler, and begins to drink it. He can then be seen going back to his car without paying and driving off. It's believed that Anggy was already dead at this point. After his arrest, his family said they were shocked because they said they couldn't imagine him being so violent. I guess his actions during his DWI arrest and the police showing up at their cabin weren't enough to clue them in. They even tried to blame his actions on drugs. Regardless, Jared remains in jail, awaiting the outcome of the case. Lauren Porter Johansen was born on October 30th, 2001 in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and was said to love animals, horseback riding, singing in the choir, and going to the beach. She was also known for being very good at makeup and was a representative for Ulta Beauty. After graduating from Van Cleve High School, she enrolled in the nursing program at the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg. Unfortunately, she was also in a very tumultuous relationship with 23-year-old Bryson Rivers from Saucier, Mississippi. Rivers was known to be violent at times and extremely jealous. In December of 2023, 22-year-old Lauren went with Rivers on a short vacation to Nashville, Tennessee. On December 11th, they spent the day at the Frist Art Museum and then went to Topgolf before returning to their Airbnb to get ready for a night out on the town. They decided to visit a local bar to watch a football game, and that's where all hell would break loose. It's there that Rivers began accusing Lauren of having sex with the bartender. He wouldn't let it go, so they got up and left. Once back in the car, he began slapping and punching her, and then took her phone so she couldn't call for help. He then began driving, despite her pleas for him to stop. When he finally did, he pulled into a parking lot in the Germantown area of Nashville and continued his assault on her for the next hour. Every time a car would pass, she would blow the horn in an attempt to get help, but no one stopped. Rivers then put his forearm against her throat until she almost passed out. Finally, an officer noticed the commotion and came over to see what was going on. When he opened the door to their car, he found a very intoxicated Rivers on top of Lauren, who was now covered in blood from a cut on her forehead, and her eye was swollen shut. The officer also found a handgun in the car. Rivers was then arrested, while Lauren was sent to the hospital to be treated for her injuries. He was charged with aggravated kidnapping, aggravated stalking, and witness coercion. On April 3, 2024, Judge Cheryl Blackburn made the worst decision possible by reducing his bond from $250,000 to $150,000, which only required him to pay $15,000 to a bondsman. Lauren's father even told the judge if Rivers was let out, he would kill his daughter, but she refused to listen. Rivers was required to get a GPS ankle monitor, remain in Davidson County, and have no contact with Lauren or possess a weapon. He was also required to be bailed out before 4 p.m. to ensure that he could get fitted with the ankle bracelet from Tracking Solutions. On May 15, 2024, Rivers and his mother asked for his bond conditions to be changed so he could live in Mississippi instead of Davidson County, but the judge denied the request. Elite Bonding was approved on June 4, 2024 to bond him out, but they decided against it because Rivers had no family in Davidson County where he was supposed to remain. The following day, Brooks Bonding was approved, and they decided to handle the case and bail him out. The agent from the company came and signed the judge's order without ever looking at the conditions. This would ultimately lead to multiple order violations. On Monday, June 24, 2024, they posted his bond, and he was released at 4:05 p.m. That was the first violation because Tracking Solutions was already closed, forcing the bond agent to take him to Freedom Monitoring Services instead. Once there, Rivers lied and told the monitoring company that he was allowed to return to Mississippi, and since they didn't have the bond order, they took him at his word and didn't set the GPS tracking perimeter to Davidson County. When Freedom Monitoring finally received the paperwork on Friday, they realized that Rivers had lied to them. They then called him and ordered him to return to Nashville to receive a new ankle monitor. That same day, his probation officer called Tracking Solutions, only to discover that he had never reported in, unaware that he had been taken to Freedom Monitoring instead. The DA's office, also unaware of Freedom Monitoring's involvement, reached out to Lauren's dad to inform him that Rivers did not have an ankle monitor and had not been heard from. Unfortunately, her dad didn't answer, so they left a voicemail, which he wouldn't discover for a few days. 4 days after being released, on June 29th, Rivers returned to Nashville and was equipped with the correct ankle monitor. Shockingly, he had Lauren in the passenger seat of his car, once again violating his order. The bonding company was supposed to return him to jail if he had any contact with her after his release, but they failed to do that. If the bonding company had done its job, Lauren would most likely still be alive. It's unclear how he and Lauren hooked back up, but her father believes she was most likely taken against her will. On July 1st, Freedom Monitoring noticed that the battery on Rivers' monitor was down to 6% and called him at about 10:09 p.m., telling him to charge it, which he did. Around midnight, he called in to say that he wouldn't be able to make it to court the following day because he didn't have a ride. This same day, Lauren's dad discovered the voicemail and began trying to get in touch with Lauren, but was unable to. He then received a text message from Lauren's phone, but he said it didn't seem like it was her. Rivers was supposed to appear in court on July 2nd, but he failed to show up, just like he said. His ankle monitor last showed him in Biloxi, Mississippi, where he was not supposed to be. At that point, everyone was in panic mode. The monitoring company and the bonding company were desperately trying to get in touch with him, but were unsuccessful. Lauren's dad was also trying to find Lauren and called his other daughter, who lived with her. She said that Lauren wasn't there and the security camera at their front door had been destroyed. He also noticed that the Life 360 app on her phone had been disabled. At 10 a.m., Rivers' ankle monitor officially died. The monitoring company then called his mother, but she claimed she hadn't seen or heard from him. That same day, the court learned that he had violated the order by returning to Mississippi and that he had used the wrong GPS company, and a warrant was immediately issued for his arrest. On July 3, 2024, Hattiesburg police were able to track Lauren's vehicle through OnStar and found that it pinged at the Wolf River Cemetery in Gulfport, Mississippi. Deputies arrived just in time to see Rivers running away from Lauren's car. Upon searching the car, they found Lauren wrapped in a sheet in the trunk. She had sadly been beaten to death so severely that I can't even discuss the details in this video. A manhunt then ensued for the next 6 hours in the nearby woods. They finally caught him by tricking him into believing that the text messages they were sending were coming from a friend of his. This ultimately lured him out of the woods, and he was taken into custody at 11 p.m. Mississippi made sure he was unable to make bail and placed his bond at $1 million. He now remains in jail, awaiting the outcome of his case. Mary Elizabeth Whitaker was born in Greencastle, Indiana, on October 23, 1952. After graduating from Greencastle High School, she enrolled at Jacobs School of Music at Indiana University, Bloomington. Mary was a very skilled violinist and performed in several major orchestras and pit orchestras for Broadway shows, such as the first run of The Lion King. She also toured with the New York City Opera Touring Company and went on tour with Barbra Streisand from 2006 to 2007. She was an advocate for musicians and served on the local 802 Executive and Trial Board, which is the largest local union of professional musicians in the world. In 2014, 61-year-old Mary was splitting her time between Sherman, New York and New York City. She would typically spend her summers in Sherman so she could perform in the Chautauqua Orchestra. She would then go back to New York City for the remainder of the year with her partner, Suzanne Gilman. Sadly, this summer would not end well after a horrible tragedy occurred. On August 20th, 2014, after not being able to reach Mary, her friends went by her home and shockingly found her dead in the garage and called 911. She had sadly been shot in the chest and leg. Investigators began to suspect that she was the victim of an armed robbery at her home earlier that morning, mainly due to the fact that her 2007 Chevy HHR and credit cards were missing and were actively being used. Investigators began going to the businesses where the credit cards had been used and obtained security footage of the suspects. They then located Mary's car in Erie, Pennsylvania. From there, they were finally able to locate the suspects and identified them as 43-year-old Jonathan Conklin and 30-year-old Charles Sanford. On August 22nd, 2 days after the murder, both men were arrested and charged with murder, first-degree robbery, first-degree criminal use of a firearm, second-degree burglary, and fourth-degree grand larceny. Sanford said that on the morning of the murder, he went and knocked on her door, pretending that his car had run out of gas. Meanwhile, Conklin was hiding outside with a gun. Mary agreed to let him use her phone to call for help, but upon opening the door, they shot her to death. They then dragged her body into the garage and made sure she was dead with a knife to the neck. Sanford said he regretted his actions and described Mary as a person with a good heart who he took advantage of. After the murder, they stole her vehicle and began using her stolen credit cards at various businesses in Erie. In the end, both men were found guilty. Conklin was sentenced to 25 years to life, while Sanford was sentenced to 15 years to life. In the summer of 2018, 27-year-old Stephen Andrew Donaldson was living in Arbroath, United Kingdom, and working in the oil industry. He was said to have many friends and a loving family. He had been dating 20-year-old Tasman Glass, an actress and singer who was allegedly pregnant with his child, but the two had recently broken up. The insurance company had totaled a car that he had bought for her, and she owed him £1,000 but was refusing to pay. Then, on June 7, 2018, Stephen's body was discovered underneath his burnt-out car in a nature reserve park in Scotland. He had sadly been beaten and stabbed to death. They also found evidence that Stephen was running through the parking lot while being attacked and eventually dragged back to his car prior to it being set on fire. In total, there were 26 stab wounds. Investigators quickly honed in on Tasman as a potential suspect and her new boyfriend, Stephen Dickey, and his friend, Callum Davidson. They only learned about Dickey and Davidson after questioning Glass's alibi on the night of the murder. She claimed she had been with the two men and Davidson's girlfriend, Claire Ogston, at Davidson's house in Merriwell Bray. She then said she had gone to meet Stephen at the parking lot in Kiermer, but claimed he never showed up. She then insisted she had returned home and went to bed, a claim that was backed up by her Wi-Fi router and Apple Watch. However, investigators were convinced she was involved and decided to check Dickey and Davidson's phones and got the breakthrough they were looking for. All the suspects claimed to have been in bed before midnight, but their cell phone data showed them in the center of Kiermer between 12:39 and 12:51 a.m. Investigators also found it extremely suspicious that some of the content on their phones from that night had been deleted. Plus, the health app on Dickey's phone showed that he was extremely active around the time of the murder, with exercise that was equivalent to climbing 11 flights of stairs. Investigators then discovered surveillance footage of Davidson riding his bike through the town center at 2 a.m. on the night of the murder. They were able to locate the bike and shockingly found traces of Stephen's blood on the handlebars. Now that they had their prime suspects, they needed a motive and soon learned about the money that Tasman owed Stephen. All three individuals were then arrested and charged with murder. It turns out that Tasman had no plans to pay the money and instead plotted to have Stephen murdered. The first step of the plan was to lure him to the area of Peter Pan Play Park, where he was attacked by Dickey and Davidson. They then took him to the nature reserve while Tasman returned home to set up her alibi. Once the men were at the nature reserve, they began beating and stabbing Stephen until he was dead. Afterward, they burned his car to destroy any remaining evidence and deleted content, including text messages from their phones. In the end, Dickey and Davidson were convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Tasman, on the other hand, was shockingly only given 10 years. In November 2019, Tasman and Davidson attempted to have their sentences reduced, but the court denied the request. However, she has since been released on parole. The following day, after the court denied the sentence reduction for Tasman and Davidson, Dickey took his own life. The day before, he had lost his prison job after refusing to wear prison-issued jogging pants when serving food. To this day, Tasman Glass has never shown remorse for what she did. 12-year-old Maria Gomez-Perez was living with her father, Andres Gomez-Alonso, in Gainesville, Georgia, when she strangely disappeared from their driveway on May 29, 2024. Law enforcement and volunteers spent weeks searching for her, but had no luck. Then, in mid-July, her father received a strange Facebook message that said she was okay, she was not coming home, and he needed to stop looking for her. This was very concerning because investigators had learned that she had been communicating with men online and expressing her desire to run away. Thankfully, this message was posted because it helped investigators track her location from the user's IP address. From there, the IP address led them to a phone number associated with a home in Dover, Ohio. 4 investigators then traveled to Ohio and located Maria at a city swimming pool with 34-year-old Antonio Augustin Alon. They waited for them to leave and followed them to a Walmart in nearby New Philadelphia. Once there, they were able to recover Maria and arrest Antonio. He was then charged with interference with custody. The two had met online and she expressed her unhappiness and desire to leave her home. So he drove almost 10 hours from Dover, Ohio to Gainesville, Georgia to pick her up. Officials have said there may be more charges coming, but for now, he remains in jail awaiting the outcome of the case. Thankfully, Maria is now back home with her father.